Are you seeing this yellow page?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I actually wrote it out here so that I wouldn't, as you can tell already, I have the capacity to go on and on any given line. So what I did was I wrote it down so that I could just follow my own script here, okay? So welcome to the permissions participation page. We will work through and from this page today. If you are here, it is probably because you attended last week's lecture, and there's a link to the lecture right there. If you didn't see the lecture last week, please feel free to go back to it after this workshop. It's not essential that the lecture was watched in order to participate fully in today's activities. Permissions is a means of looking for the sake of new postures. The simple premise of the permissions exercise is that we can learn from the postures of artists and from the things that they make. This exercise can be done with any type of creative practice, but for this exercise, for this workshop, I will be guiding us towards conceptual art and conceptualist practices in order to make connections to teaching postures, teaching practice, and educational encounters and events. And I think I laid some of that out in some of my answers earlier. So here's an example. I'm going to give you an example of how to do the permissions exercise. This is a work in this picture, and in these two pictures that you see here, by the Taiwanese artist Lee Ming-wei. It is called The Dinner Project, and there's a link there in case you're interested in Lee Ming-wei's work. You can read about it, or you can look at it and make an educated guess. So what's really interesting about the permissions process is that you can actually read about it and you'll gather some other permissions in that way. We already talked about the work narrative, but you can also just look at the pictures and try to figure stuff out, right? Or even make bad guesses. This is such an interesting thing. You can make bad guesses, even bad guesses or wrong guesses still open up the imagination. So then, and it's actually really simple. So you'll forgive me for the rudimentary aspect of this. You will just ask these two questions, which are the questions that we ask of all art. It's a form and content question. How is this thing made? That's the formal question. What is this thing about? That's the content question, right? And this is everything from sports cars to skyscrapers to really fancy meals to McDonald's, right? Human production, is somewhere on that spectrum of form and content. And if we want to learn from those things, we ask ourselves the questions: how is this thing made? What is this thing about? Your answers to those two questions will guide you to the permissions that the work opens up for your posture as a teacher, a creative practitioner, a citizen, and a member of various social groups. And that was my funny way of saying your families, your relationships, your, whatever else you belong to. So I put two pictures of Lee Ming-wei's piece here. One, because I wanted you to see the documentation of it being enacted. And this is a piece where Lee Ming-wei sets up a schedule, and people, wherever it's being shown, people sign up, and then they show up to either have supper or dinner with him or lunch, depending on what time of the day it's set up at, right? I put this second one in here because this thing there's a sort of what's called a double ontology, what I've heard some scholars call a double ontology, which is that the thing exists in two ways. It exists in the real, like when you experience it, perhaps because you had dinner with Lee Ming-wei, because that would be a different way to experience it than anybody else. Or, anybody else. I'll stand by that. And then there's the sort of artifacts that are left over, whether it's this video projection or the actual sculptural elements that are part of the work, right? That were part of the dinner invitation, dinner project. And it's an ongoing piece that he enacts in different museums. So now the question is, and you'll notice there's no more instructions here, right? The question then is, you ask yourself these questions: how is this thing made? What is this thing about? And then the next thing that you say is, what does it permit? So you can ask the question, what does it permit for a teaching practice? And I'll just give you one example, right? It opens up a pathway towards eating as pedagogy, sharing a meal as pedagogy, breaking bread as pedagogy. Something I don't need to tell a lot of you, because if you have an art classroom, you know that a bunch of your kids come to your room to eat lunch. And there's some of the most opportune moments for you to teach stuff, for you to develop that relationship that later on, when they're saying, I can't get my coils to roll out correctly, and you say, keep going, keep trying, it doesn't matter if you fail, they believe you. And they believe you because of that intangible moment that you had with them when you were eating. So what would happen if we made that more deliberate? And you saw in the lecture that I gave last week that there was a piece that I made that was called Split My Lunch. It was inspired by Li Mingwei, right? I had an office that was in a hallway that was kind of hidden and nobody would ever go into. And I wanted people to go into my space. So I made a placard that said Split My Lunch on it, that promised to give anybody who showed up at 12:20 on Tuesday half of my lunch. And I got to meet so many people that I work in the building with, and that students, faculty, staff, people who weren't even in the school but happened to know that this was happening. Okay, so you understand my posture changes, right? And again, I use the word posture because it's a way that you position yourself. You position your body, you position your soul, you position your brain, your mind. And I know that all of those things are connected to each other, but I'm separating them to say your whole being, you position it, you posture it, you take a posture, and the posture could be a posture of generosity, could be a posture of wanting to learn, etc. Right? So here's the activity. And the activity, just so you know, my plan is to turn it into an actual book. Right? And I have the funds to do it and everything. So, and you will all get a copy of it. If you contribute to the book, and if you give us a mailing address, we will send you one. Okay. So let me just walk you through the fields that you have to fill out. And you can do this as many times as you want. We can leave it open for 2 weeks and people can just keep going back in here and doing it. This is the activity. So you put your name if you want to. You notice if the field doesn't have an asterisk, that means you don't have to fill it out. It's not obligation. The only fields that have asterisks are the one that says, what artists or artwork did you look at? And the one that says, what permissions does this work open up for us? So everything else is optional. But if you put your name in this category here, you will get credit for having written that permission or just like found it, right? You put your email here. The only reason we want it, and where it goes to a Google Doc that we have, I say we because I have an assistant. It goes to that Google Doc, and we will only use it if we need to contact you for something. So like if there's a spelling issue or something, we're going to be like, did they do this intentionally? So we'll probably write to you and ask, right? Instead of just assuming. What is your affiliation? If you would like to put the name of where you're learning or where you teach or what project you're associated with or your website or something, we'll put that under your name on the credit, right? The next thing is, what artists did you look at? What conceptual artists did you look at? More specifically, what artwork did you look at? And then if you want to, there's an option here to put links if you want us to find the image that way. And then here's where you're going to put your analysis. And it's just like I did that Li Mingwei thing. Like I looked at it, I thought, okay, this is about generosity. It's made by setting up a situation where 2 people can have a meal together, and only 2 people. And it's an artwork that's seen by very few or experienced in the real only by a very few. That moves me, opens up the permission for me to enact behaviors as a professor, as a teacher, that are just me and another person. You know, of course, there's a lot of ethical considerations, and all of those are taken into play. I'm not promoting anything that would cross the line here. You know what the rules are of the material that you're working with. So if you work for an institution and you know that you can't have that kind of one-on-one contact, then this is not something you're going to be able to do. But it doesn't mean that you can't look at that Li Meng piece and think sharing meals is a thing. So what if we like took all the art tables and lined them all together across the room, and then had, 1 week, all the students bring a double lunch and they split it with someone else. And the next week, the other half of the class brings a double lunch and they split it with the other person. And you can talk about art while doing this art performance and teach everything that goes through it. Okay, so that's the permissions link. And then the next one is, what is your mailing address? Now, this is, you only have to give it to us if you want us to send you a hard copy. What our plan is to do is as many as we get in the next 2 weeks. And again, you can make 50 of these if you want. We'll turn them into a PDF. That'll be kind of like a book. And then you can either download the PDF for free, or you can get the book for free. Now, the book, we'll make it available at whatever the cost is, because we'll just print them through lulu.com, which is like an online publishing house. And, for a book like this, it'll be black and white. They might charge like $4 for it, plus shipping or something. We can find a coupon for it. And people can just have it for whatever it costs. We're not looking to make any money off of it. But yours, for being participants, we will order this many, however many people are participating. However many people give us a mailing address, we will order that many, and we'll send you at least 1 copy, if not 2 copies, depending on what the cost is. So you might ask yourself, okay, where to begin? Where do I begin? So lately I've been teaching a class called Teacher as Conceptual Artist, and we're working specifically around a list of artists, conceptual artists from the global South. So yes, there's an entire discourse out there, and there's a lot of history written and a ton of art books that pretty much cover everybody, all the white, straight males, and everybody who worked in Europe and the United States, right? But there's an entire history and examples, contemporary and historical examples of artists from the global South. And the global South is defined as, I guess it's the new term for what previously was known maybe as the developing world or the third world or something, right? So there's a list here. You can see the list. It's all links, and it tells you what country each artist is from. It's an incomplete list. We're constantly adding. If you have names that you would like us to add to it, by all means, send an email. We'll put them in here. This is just a means to start. It doesn't have to be the list that you work off of. The very specific reason why my students and I are working specifically through artists of the global South is because something very interesting happens. It's a very interesting difference between conceptualisms, which is what has been happening in the global South, and conceptual art, big C conceptual art, right? And it might be too long to get into it here, but I guess the quickest way to say it is that a lot of the work that's from the global South is rooted in the everyday experiences of the people, not just of one singular person, but of like countries and classes of people and identity groups and stuff, right? So there are these it's a kind of it has a different kind of humanitarian reach to it. So I'm going to stop this, but what I would like to know is if there are any questions.
So basically people can choose whatever art they want.
Yeah. And let me say one additional thing about it, because the temptation might be to curricularize what you're seeing.
Right.
Like to do the legwork for your future readers, which will be everybody who has the book and gets the PDF. But the idea here really is more to just make seedlings. And if the difference between a seed and a seedling is that the seedling it has a sprout already, right? So you're doing that people will look at your seedling and they'll take it and do whatever they want with it. And it should be that way, as opposed to us like going all the way through and writing the curriculum for someone, the prescriptive curriculum. And you don't have to do the dinner project. Like
Yeah.
that's just the example that I gave.
Yeah.
You can do any conceptual artwork that you want to do. And again, you don't have, I gave you this list of artists from the global South to start with, but you don't, I mean, if you love John Baldessari, give us some John Baldessari permissions. You know, if you love Marina Abramovic, give us some of those. Do you know what I'm saying? Like there's nothing, I don't have anything against you going with the artists that you're familiar with and the ones that you are already like in the, you know, like investigating and looking at. Just so you know, this whole form is connected to a Google Doc, Google folder. So all your answers are directly going into that Google folder. It's already organized as an Excel sheet. And like I said, my research assistant is the one who's going to take it all and turn it into a book for you. So it shouldn't take us super long to get it, to have it turned around. You can, I would even say you can invite people to participate in it if you want, because the idea really is for us to walk away with a nice little chat book filled with seedlings. The more that we have, the better.